So I'm Aline Derderian. I am French-Armenian. I was born in the south of France, in Marseille, and moved to the UK when I was about 18 to join the St. Martin's School as a student on the BA Performance Design and Practice, which I graduated from in 2015, I think. And I started to teach right after this on the same department and on a module that was called Design for Dance, and that was a little bit of the beginning of my creative journey, that experience, which led me the following years to study research, dance research, both in France and in the UK. Both at Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance in London and in various universities in France. And so on and so forth, I felt the need to keep on going with my creative and academic practice through the writing of a PhD thesis that I've defended back in 2022 or 3, now it's a bit vague. And this PhD research sort of wanted to question the idea of the cultural heritage, specifically Armenian cultural heritage, in the practice, in the female visual arts and choreography worlds, let's say, environments. Yes, the Armenian history and traditions play a big role in my work, but it's been a journey, I'd say, because back in 2015, I think I had a way different perspective on what my heritage was, and I like to mention the idea of romanticism regarding your heritage. So I think that these evolved and transformed with years, and perhaps that's something that I thought was relevant back then, today feels, perhaps wrong or not ethical enough in my regards, and that was, supported by the theory, the reading, the writing, the investigation on what a specific, gesture, fabric, sculpture mean, and how could that be relevant into choreographic work so it doesn't look like a folklore or a cultural appropriation, which is something that I'm deeply concerned with, let's say. So as it happens, we're in this amazing library, and and I could find this book, which is a sort of catalogue of Teresa Mirzoyan's work. And Teresa Mirzoyan is an amazing female sculptor, also teacher. And her work, for example, the way she has to represent the female body as strong and as graceful is a huge influence for me. So it's not that much about the traditions necessarily anymore, but it's more about how to, dig into the history of arts in Armenia or elsewhere, but in Armenia, South Caucasus, and how to celebrate it, take inspiration, but also being able to get away from it in order to create your, your own contemporary, aesthetic and have a voice, that following these people's path. Well, Well, thanks for asking this question, which is fascinating. Yes, so I guess that the meanings can vary widely, but from my perspective, when I mention practice-based research, it means, well, first of all, that too is a big heritage and influence I get from my British education in the arts, especially at St. Martin's, but also at Trinity Laban on my choreography MFA, where practice leads to either researching through text, theory, academia, but can also lead to an artistic project. So from very early on, from when I've integrated St. Martin's and I was about 18 then, I've been used to juggle always between dance training, theory, attending lectures, going to conferences, going to classes, and go back to the studio, research on it, offer, I don't know, some sort of exploration that I share with an audience, go back to school, you know, so it's always been like a circle, which is not that common if you think about it in France, for example. It tends to happen more and more, but this is not something that's, let's say, rooted into people's methodologies of work. But to me it's necessary, it's essential. And I felt that need, especially after I graduated from CSM, because my final project was this piece called L'Antigone, which was let's say, an adaptation of Antigone myth by Jean Cocteau. And that was, you know, sort of written not accordingly, but at the same time as the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide. And from that time on, I felt a huge need to dig deeper into the text, into the history, into the museums, curations, you know, like history of arts and theory per se, before I get back to the studio and explore something that has to do with Armenian, you know, culture. So to me, when I say practice-based research, really, and that's what I like. That's what my PhD, let's say, label was about too. It means trying to find the answers through the body or through the artwork, the practice, and put it into words later on, or other way around. But by the end of the day, it's a dialogue between what you produce as literature and what you produce as art, in my case, choreography most of the time. Yes, I'm totally interested in new technologies, especially video and films. I've actually just finished a short film called Circling Dances that I've shot last year when I was in Yerevan, not only Yerevan but in Armenia, and which is a proper mix between, you know, dance, teaching, and the use of the camera and the use of new media in a way. But I guess I tend to think of new technologies or new media in a way that is economical, because I could quote, or I could, you know, mention various artists. Like I'm thinking about Wayne McGregor, for example, who's this British, very well-known choreographer whose use of new technologies goes way beyond, you know, film or video or mapping, but it's an actual, you know, I'd say the new technologies are part of an actual character or member of the choreography group. But in my case, when, you know, budget and funding are a bit or drastically restricted, I always tend to think of a concept that's going to be perhaps more immersive than creating a beautiful setting and context that could be labeled as this is a new technology of video art and whatnot. So, for example, certain dances originally was thought as a video dance film that I would project in cinemas or places like that, but it turned out that the economical way in which we took this trip led us to a project that was not relevant anymore, because it was just me and my dad coming to Armenia with a tiny camera, a proper camera, but still not a professional Hollywood camera, and so shooting this film with our backpack and like no equipment at all, almost. And so by the end of the day, I ended up with all these images that I wanted to share, but I thought, okay, like nobody's ever going to, offer me a voice, like offer me a platform to show this film, because it's not quality enough. So I thought about a concept that could work. And so these films turned up into a proper installation that you can experience through a phone, and that also invites you to put yourself into the situation of the person who filmed. It can definitely, but I also tend to think that, for example, AI, is becoming so important into everybody's life that it's also relevant for artists to, be able to resist it. That yes, it can be a tool. It can be a tool, never a substitute to your practice, and so you need to keep in mind, the integrity of your work, and not be too tempted to let it all happen through new technologies. I appreciate some artists, using it, and who've been, interested in technologies forever. But I tend to think that in my case, the roughness of the work that I produce comes from, perhaps, in the first place, the lack of resources. But that also tended to become a statement after all. So it's something to negotiate with. Okay, yes, my PhD thesis, not only but quite majorly, talked about or explored Anna Halprin and Armen Ohanian's bodies of work. This is very, it's actually quite opposite but also intertwined. So in terms of Anna Halprin, what interested me with this world that she created was the set of radical aspects of the it's hard to explain, the radical aspects or vision she had about the body and about creating collective of people to be together in space. She is somebody who figured out that perhaps dancing away from the theatres was not a bad idea. Reconnecting with nature was probably key to finding truth in the movement quality that she wanted to explore and give to experience. She is somebody who worked with kids a lot. So she had always wanted to keep that natural instinct within her work, and I consider Anna Halprin as somebody, yes, of course, she's a pioneer, with this is a debate, but a lot of people call her, a pioneer of postmodern dance, but postmodern dance also involves people like Merce Cunningham, Trisha Brown, and they were quite opposite. So it's a time where there were, there was the Californian scene and the New York dance scene, and these people were quite opposites in what they offer as visually. But then people like Trisha Brown, John Cage, like all these team of the Judson church would go to Anna Halprin's place in California in order to take workshops with her. So what interested me in the first place was, yes, the idea of the ritual that's central to every sort of body exploration she offered. The idea of working with scores, the taking into consideration the space in which you work, be it an architectural monument or a wood or the seaside. So the connection, of the body with the landscape, and not considering that the body is prior to a place where it performs. And then putting that parallel to Armen Ohanian, it's the idea of the origins. Anna Halprin was, Ashkenazi. These influenced a lot of her way of thinking, of her wish to gather people from different roots, nations, body shapes, stuff like that, at a time where dance was quite, structural and, let's say, structured, I think is a good word. And Armen Ohanian being from Armenian origins and who've traveled from a country to another to end up in Europe to make a living out of dance and playing with Orientalism, was for me an interesting way to position myself, perhaps right in the middle. Like these were two artists, female artists, who had similar interrogation or concerns about dance and arts and how to write about it as me, but with a decades of difference. So I thought that was interesting to discuss that in the writing, because it mainly influenced the way I tend to think about this subject now. Yeah. Well, that's yet another interesting question, but I think that the female body, there's so many ways to discuss this, but in the case of unrepresented cultures, or I don't like the word minority, but underrepresented cultures such as Armenian in the West, for example, I guess that's representing the female body as it is also gives, yet another perspective on what the dancing body should be. These are questions that are very actual and very, current. We've evolved from everybody needs to look the same and very ballerina-like up until today, But in terms of, for example, if we go back to this book, come on, you can tell that this. So Teresa Miroyan, she represented a lot of female characters, protagonists, and look at the strength of these ladies. Come on, they're queens, and they're very sculptural, structural, muscled, athletic, and that's kind of body shape is something that I'm interested to explore also, because I do not, or perhaps I used to not necessarily fit in, and so I'm interested in the idea of how do you make yourself fit in when you know that you don't, and so how can choreography, and that's perhaps when choreography and dance practice sort of separate, is like when you are somebody who works with both be it me, for example, performing for other people, where I can be, like I can try to be like the perfect ballerina sometimes, or I used to when I was younger, like going to auditions and trying, my best to disappear somehow, to fit the rest of the group towards, or be similar to me choreographing and looking for people who feel the same as me and who look different, and like put them all together and find the right movement, project, energy that's going to create unity, I think is important. And yes, I mainly work with female bodies and women. So again, like I guess that women are yet another subject of society that's completely underrepresented or not necessarily represented in the greatest way. I don't know. And I guess that the artists nowadays have that voice or that space to voice these problematics through visuals, dance pieces, projects. Yes, so I presented 2 different works at ICA. The first one was this performance called We Should Return to a Winter Home, an embodied research on Armen Ohanian, which is a 20-minute improvisation based on a choreographic score that I've written, where the performer, could be me, could be someone else, change choreographic task. Yeah, this is another term that Halprin would use, the choreographic task, meaning this is something that you have to do in a specific amount of time, but nobody knows what it's going to turn like. So this performance was made back in the days, like perhaps 5 years ago, and on an original not score, let's say nappe sonore, by Thibaut Prévost and Derderdian, and it was really dear to me to present this in Armenia. It was the first time here, and this is something that, yes, like this work goes back to Armen Ohanian's first autobiography called The Dancer of Shamaha, in which she gives an account of, Armenian history from the 19th century up until she left to Europe. But it's also very personal what she says, and she is not a historian, so therefore, like you could always discuss the historical facts that she mentions, but still, what's interesting in this work is how close she is to her emotions and how that has been translated into her literature, poetry and dance. And so my performance in that respect tried to explore this narrative, but also try to question the emotional / bodily state in which she could have been in. So that's why I've chosen to show this work here. So that was the first part, and other part was the presentation of a book that I've recently published by the side of Evasian Publishing House, whose director is Gevorg Evasian. And so this book, Dancing Beyond Memories, Armenian Cultural Heritage and Corporal Reality, is a discussion we've had with different artists and choreographers in the diaspora or in Armenia around that idea again of the impact of the cultural heritage and the past memory into our practices. all the artists in this book tend to use the body or to represent the female body in the different pieces and projects. And so it's a discussion that we had back in 2020, and that kept on going up until 2024. So it's been actualized accordingly to the geopolitical Armenian situation, COVID, and feminism as well. And again, this was a premiere in Armenia, and it was important for me to come and discuss it in an environment where people would not only be, attached to the Armenian roots and what the book has to say about it, but also to open a dialogue with other cultural amateurs or experts in Yerevan. And I think it's important to mention that the book has been translated. It was originally written in English, it's been translated into French and Western Armenian. And so a lot of the contemporary dance or gender studies terminology that we're using in the book don't necessarily exist in that language. And so to us, the book is an attempt to open up dialogue and conversation around how can we simultaneously make sure that the ancestral, well, I'm not sure if that ancestral is the right word, but the language is not jeopardized or is not at stake of disappearing, but can also, evolve, especially through the use of new words such as, embodiment, kinesthetic, corporal reality, and all that jazz, really. Well, being here has also been an opportunity for me to write and research regarding what's happening next. So I'm in the process of creating something that's not a solo anymore. I think I feel like I'm at the edge of being a bit done with it for the time being, and I'm looking forward to have some more people involved into the work. It won't necessarily have to do with Armenian or Armenian history or anything as such. It would yet still, I guess that it's something that's intrinsic. It's in my body somehow. Like this all Armenian imagery and reflections. But so yeah, definitely thinking about a work that's more performing arts like, and a little bit less conceptual or pedagogical like I've been doing for the past few years. But you'll know more about it. I guess in a few months, hopefully.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, Aline.
Thank you.